Fallout 4 is a fairly easy game normally, but its hardest difficulty, Survival Mode, is probably one of the most difficult game modes out there, and in this video, I've further enhanced the difficulty of Survival Mode to create the ultimate Fallout 4 challenge. For this video, I'll be trying to find out if I can beat Fallout 4 on Survival Mode Plus. The rules are as simple as it gets. I have to beat the game on Survival Mode with all the other mods I've downloaded to increase the difficulty active as well. I went with a Metro theme for this challenge, so on top of Survival Mode, I'll also have to deal with mods like Gas Masks of the Wasteland, making it so that I have to wear a gas mask with a filter or I'll die of radiation poisoning, the Nuclear Winter and Winter Overhaul mods so that I have to keep warm or I'll die of frostbite, Agony to add a ton more wounds, illnesses, and diseases to the game for me to deal with, and Arbitration, No Place is Safe, Deadly Commonwealth Expansion, Immersive Fallout, and Zombie Walkers to just generally make the game more difficult, making the enemies smarter, allowing them to spawn on me occasionally or hunt me down, making them stronger, making gameplay a little more realistically clunky, and making it so that I have to deal with zombies that can only be killed via headshots so that most human enemies I fight either have to be double tapped or outright killed twice. My end goal is simply to beat the main questline of Fallout 4. Now, with all the rules and particulars outlined, let's start the run. So as you can imagine, this run would be next to impossible without a little pick-me-up at the start of the game for a very specific reason I'll get to later, and since this is a Metro-inspired run, I decided to grab some Metro armor and weapons. I got a gas mask, some filters, and some decently warm clothes to start with from the vault, so things were going well to start, but while crafting my Metro weapons and armor, something I have to do because Xbox doesn't have console commands so I have to manually give myself stuff, I was killed by that problem I mentioned before. Oh, by the way, to make things more grating for my nerves and mental health, an added real-life challenge is that I downloaded a mod that extends the death cam to, like, 10 minutes, and one that plays what you say every time I die this run. This was funny and cute the first, let's say, 15 times, and then it got real old and real frustrating real fast. That song got stuck in my head and would play in my dreams. I was living a nightmare. As for that problem, well, introducing the No Place is Safe mod. As the name would suggest, if you spend too long in any given place, no matter where it is, some high-level raiders will spawn on you and kill you. After a couple restarts since you can't save manually on survival, only being able to save when you sleep, including one time when this happened. Not sure what exactly happened, but it was pretty funny and broke up the monotony. And after several ambushes and concerts of what you say, I got all my gear, cleared the bugs from Sanctuary with Codsworth, and then barely took out a pack of raiders 5 feet out of Sanctuary after an extended gunfight. After that, I easily dispatched these 2 blood bugs, but when I make it into Concord proper, I get rushed down by a group of melee raiders while their buddies with guns pick at me from afar with automatic weapons. Suffice it to say, I died pretty quickly. After restarting from when I finished getting my gear, I worked my way back through all the bugs and raiders in and around Sanctuary, but this time I stopped at Red Rocket where I made a bed and saved, and I would spend a lot of time respawning from this save, because the Concord section was easily one of the hardest parts of this entire run. This time, I took down all the melee raiders and some zombies from behind a building, and though I almost got gunned down again after trying to shoot the raiders with guns, I let the zombies distract them, recover, and then cleared out most of the raiders until I get annihilated by a raider looter. On my next attempt, after an incredibly close battle that saw me on the verge of death with a broken gas mask inhaling rads, I was able to defeat the raider looter only because Dogmeat was able to distract her. I got into the Museum of Freedom and equipped the rest of my Hansa armor since unfortunately the Metro gas masks don't count as actual gas masks for Gas Masks of the Wasteland, but you can take off your gas mask in indoor cells. And though I had an infection and was dehydrated, I also got some new, powerful weapons from those raiders, so I worked my way through both the raiders in the museum and the raiders that hunted me down from the No Place is Safe mod, and took out all the zombies that spawned from the raiders. But Preston wouldn't talk to me, so I tried to force the plot to continue by going up and getting the power armor, but since you can't wear a gas mask and power armor, I soaked up a ton of rads, so, in a panic, I tried to jump down and maybe get the Deathclaw to spawn, but I fell to my death. This attempt, I used my Stallion handgun from Metro and was able to much more handily defeat the raiders outside of the museum, and then used a double-barrel shotgun to clear out the raiders inside as well as the ensuing zombies. This time Preston played ball, so I told him I had the core. That activated the outside battle. I ran and gunned my way through some of the raiders to get to the end of the street to trigger the Deathclaw event so that the Deathclaw would clear out some of the raiders for me. And then I stayed posted up in this house, picking at the raiders and the Deathclaw until the raiders were all dead and the Deathclaw ran away. Now, in the process, my leg got broken, so now I move very slowly, which was quite detrimental when I left the house to loot the raiders, and the Deathclaw came back and jump scare one-shot killed me. Not only did that absolutely blow beyond all possible comprehension because I literally cleared the entire quest and got the all clear only to be killed right at the end and now had to do it all over, but that genuinely scared the crap out of me. My next couple of attempts went, well, quite poorly, but after dozens of attempts, I finally cleared out the streets of Concord and the Museum of Raiders, Zombies, and Addicts again, and this time, I employed the same tactic as last time, this time only getting 2 broken arms and a concussion, but instead of getting murdered by the Deathclaw, I got murdered by a raider. Like I said, one of the toughest sections of the run, purely because of my low level and lack of resources. Finally, after running through everything one last time, I got back to the house, let the Deathclaw take out all the raiders, and then mag dumped about 90 rounds of 5.45 from my Kalashnikov and 2 12-gauge shells from my duplet into the Deathclaw, finishing it off and completing, like, the first real quest of the game. After catching a nap at the Red Rocket to save, and then getting murdered by an ambush after I woke up a couple times, I set out with Preston to Sanctuary, only to be insta-killed by a random grenade. Next time I teamed up with Preston to take out the cannibals and maniacs trying to kill me, I hydrated by drinking from a pool of road water, and we make it to Sanctuary. Something I needed to do since I planned to go with the Minuteman ending, seeing as it's probably the closest to Artyom getting the Spartan Rangers to save the Commonwealth. I grab the resources from the bunker in Sanctuary, sleep on the dirty mattress to save and heal, and then I set out for my next destination, Diamond City, both to continue the main quest and to get access to tons of weapons, ammo, food, water, and a place to sleep. Along the way, I killed Wolfgang and Simone for Trudy, snuck past some massive Children of Atom gunfight while all the water in sight started bugging out and turning neon green, probably shouldn't drink that. Used my duplet to save Paladin Dance & Co. from an onslaught of zombies led by a ghoul half-feral and a feral ghoul soldier, only to get out of the ongoing radstorm, to get some supplies in the Cambridge police station, and to sleep there to save and heal while having an 8-foot-tall power armor-wearing Brotherhood Paladin with a laser gun guard me from stalkers while I slept, and I ran past everyone and everything else from there to get to the big green jewel. I loaded up on supplies upon making my way in, and paid 10 5.45 rounds to some fellow Tavarish at the Dugout Inn for a good night's rest and a save. Next on the ticket is saving Nick, who would also end up being my companion for the rest of the run, and a companion I would come to greatly appreciate again after all these years. Now, I'm gonna save you some time here and let you know that while I did make it to Park Street Station, it took an hour, and most of that hour was just me running past everything as stealthily or quickly as possible after spending the first 15 minutes of that hour dying pretty much instantly whenever trying to fight my way through. Even then I died while fighting the Triggermen right at the front of the station because, for as powerful as the Stallion was, the sight was atrocious. So it was next to impossible to hit my target 90% of the time, which stalled me long enough for some addicts to hunt me down and kill me from behind. It wasn't for another hour that I would make it back to Park Street Station and take out all the Triggermen in the entrance area, at which point I used their sleeping bags to save, and then proceeded to clear out the rest of the station, making sure to double tap when possible, and using any sleeping bags, mattresses, or beds that I saw. Clearing out the vault was actually pretty easy seeing as there was a lot of cover, and the Stallion was a monster with VATS since its only real weakness is aiming, and after cleaning Dino's clock, Nikki and I cleaned up the rest of the Triggermen trash and confronted Skinny Malone. I tried talking my way out of the fight with Skinny and Darla, but they weren't having it, so I dove for cover, punched a couple holes in Darla, used VATS to take out this Triggerman, and then took out Skinny while he had his back to me. I slept in this sleeping bag to save before I left, but got jumped by these psychos and killed. Though luckily for me, I just reloaded and killed them. Then I got Nick back to Diamond City, we started the search for Sean, and after investigating Kellogg's old house, So begun the next very difficult section of the run, trekking across the wastes to reach Fort Hagen. Getting there was pretty tough. Killing a group of nearby raiders with my automatic scrap handgun and VSV wasn't too difficult, but it was something I would have to do a great many times. Right after that, I was able to take out a swarm of stingwings, something I honestly didn't appreciate as much as I should have at the time, but unfortunately the ambush of mole rats not far down the railroad caused my first death. Next time it was because, instead of a pack of stingwings waiting for me after the raiders, it was a legendary Deathclaw that one-shot me after I mag dumped into it with my AK. After that, the mole rats got me again despite my best efforts, though after, I was actually able to kill the rats with my AK, but that victory was short-lived, as I then took out a small group of raiders with my VSV and even killed the Yao Guai with my AK, but another group of stingwings set upon me, and while I was able to take out 2 of them just barely, the third one jump-scared killed me and sent me back to Diamond City. A couple of attempts later, and I was able to get past the raiders and stingwings, but the Yao Guai killed me. I knew that if I could figure out the right combination of actions to get past all 3, there was a sleeping bag that Kellogg used in a trap that I could use to save, but the problem was getting to it. This next attempt was that very combination. First, because of a bloodbug fight changing Dogmeat's pathing to use the railroad next to the one he usually follows, we skipped the mole rat encounter entirely, then I was able to kill the stingwings from afar with my VSV, and finally, I mag dumped the Yao Guai with my AK, but instead of waiting to reload, I switched to my duplet and blew him away. Remember, it's always faster to switch to your secondary than to reload. I was rewarded for my efforts with an Aurora Borealis at this time of year, at this time of day, in this part of the country, localized entirely within my Fallout 4 skybox. Finally, I made it to the sleeping bag after an hour and a half, but to my absolute dread, after disarming Kellogg's mine trap, the game wouldn't let me use the sleeping bag. I was horrified, but luckily there was a sleeping bag just outside, the one I'm assuming Kellogg actually used, so I just used that one to save instead. Good thing too, as this second section was just as, if not more brutal than the first. First I had to kill some raiders that hunted me down, then I took out all the ghouls on and around the bridge, I examined the Assaultron, made my way through the frozen forest leading to Fort Hagen, got Dogmeat to sniff the bloody rags, and then got caught in the middle of an all-out war between some raiders and gunners. I tried to hold my own and fight off any of them that came after me, but this guy basically pulled a Terminator and just straight up walked through my gunfire and killed me. Next try, I got attacked by the Deathclaw I knew was somewhere around there, because it always is, and despite getting close to killing it with my AK, it got me first. Even better yet, next run through, I was attacked and killed by Commander Palmer's Vertibird. I don't know who Commander Palmer is, or why he decided to smear me on the road, but great, that's now another thing I've got to worry about. Cool, awesome, fuck! It was also at around this time that, periodically, likely due to all the zombies in my game, the frame rate started tanking. Thought I'd mention that here in case it becomes more important later. Well, against all odds, I make it out of the forest, but Nick got downed, so I went back for him and got run down and slaughtered by the Deathclaw that presumably downed him in the first place. Then finally, while the ghoul section didn't go as well as normal, with my getting an infection and having to cure it with some antibiotics, I actually made it to the Fort Hagen area again, and instead of going straight there, I found a bed at a nearby clinic after fighting past some bugs, which allowed me to rest and save. Getting through the synths in Fort Hagen was comparatively a joke, with my scrap handgun actually doing solid damage to them, using the VSV if I needed more damage at a longer range, and there consistently being sleeping bags or beds throughout the fort, working my way down to Kellogg was pretty easy all things considered. The hardest part, other than of course Kellogg himself, was honestly fighting the raiders that hunted me down, but even then they were close enough that the duplet made short work of them. At last, it was time for the Kellogg fight. For my first attempt, words you'll never hear and expect things to go well, I talked it out with Kellogg, and when the fight started, I tried to mag dump with my AK, but got gunned down by his synth ads. Next time, I drank a bourbon, popped some buff out, shot up some medics, and huffed some jet before then again mag dumping my AK straight into Kellogg's skull, this time without even exchanging a word, but he got his stealth boy off before I could finish him, and him and his goons killed me. Same game plan the next time, but when he got his Stealth Boy off, I sprayed and prayed, and God heard my call, as I was able to not only take out Kellogg, but also his synths before they dropped me as well. By the grace of God, I won, and I was exhilarated as I was looting the place. Right up until I used Kellogg's computer to open the doors to the place, and a raider that hunted me down while I was sleeping earlier and had spawned at the exit to Fort Hagen entered the boss room while I was discussing my findings with Nick and killed me instantly. What a fun game! I am definitely not bitter and miserable. I continued to try the same strategy as last time to defeat Kellogg again, and after a less than successful attempt, the winner was mag dumping straight into his skull and then boring a 545mm sized hole through the center masses of the two synths. This time I spotted the stalker that killed me, but since he was too close I couldn't save before fighting him, so I just mentally prepped myself and rung the bell. This time I dropped him, I slept to save, dropped another stalker, and finally finished Act 1 of the main quest. After sprinting back to Diamond City as fast as my little legs could carry me, I saved, recuperated, got some supplies, and started Dangerous Minds by talking to Nick and Piper about going through Kellogg's memories in the memory den to find out how to get into the Institute. I tried to use my air rifle based on Metro's Tikhar to fight my way to Goodneighbor, but with cannibal bosses almost wiping me out 5 steps out of Diamond City, that pretty quickly devolved into just running and hiding, and then just running. By the skin of my ass I made it, and after I go through the boring brain section, Amari sends me to find Virgil in the most difficult section of this run, the Glowing Sea section. Just getting to the Glowing Sea was an exercise in futility, as I spent half the time gunning down raiders or Yao Guai with my scrap submachine gun, or being mowed down by super mutants, or beaten by raiders, or smushed by behemoths, but after semi-following the Fort Hagen path, getting pranked by a sleeping bag that doesn't work, and then finding a bed that actually works right outside of the Glowing Sea, I entered the Glowing Sea with my hazmat suit on and made my way to Virgil. I'm gonna save you a good solid hour of my attempting to get to Virgil and failing, with most of the hour being on one single attempt that I crushingly lost to a Deathclaw basically right next to Virgil after surviving ghouls, rad scorpions, stingwings, major dehydration, and tons of rads. I basically got so fed up with this part that I literally just multiplied my speed by 5 times and just blitzed through the Glowing Sea like greasy lightning, and even then something at some point still caught up to me and tagged me. This part was absolutely nuts. Virgil sends me to go get the Courser chip, I get to Green Tech Genetics in an intense rad storm, I slowly and surely work my way up Green Tech through the gunners with my Stallion after several incredibly difficult sections due to just how much damage the gunners were doing with their laser weapons, and finally, at the top of Green Tech, after several dozen deaths at just this part alone, with 2 broken arms, and in the middle of having a heart attack, I finally defeated the last of the gunners, and it was now time to take on the Courser. This was about as difficult as the Kellogg fight would have been without his synths, which, ironically enough, is lore accurate. His Stealth Boy made things difficult, but after a couple of attempts that went nowhere, I just threw 2 pulse grenades and a nuker grenade at him, and that did it. I released K1, went back to Diamond City to get my heart attack and broken arms healed, I upgraded a bunch of my guns at Arturo's weapon bench since I'd been taking several levels of Gun Nut along with things to help me survive on survival like Leadbelly, Aqua Boy, and Ghoulish, as well as perks to boost my damage with non-auto pistols and rifles, as well as with automatic weapons. I talked with Amari about the chip, and she points me to the railroad. I tried to fight my way through to the Old North Church, but very quickly died and then just decided to run there. I dispatched all the ghouls there with my VSV, and made contact with the railroad, who decoded the chip for me, and after reporting back to Virgil, it was time to get Sturgis to help me make the molecular relay device. Preston tells me I've got to help some more settlements before they can build the relay, so that's what I do next. The hardest part of these quests is quite literally getting to the settlements and the places where the quest actually happens. The battles themselves not only weren't that difficult, but they were actually kind of fun. Though that may be due to the fact that I can actually survive being attacked now that I have Metro Heavy Armor, which is basically an old repurposed Soviet-era bomb disposal suit with Tachanka armor added. I get to Ten Pines Bluff, and they ask me to clear out Corvega, and while getting there was difficult, Fighting off all the raiders there was actually probably the most fun part of the run in full. The fight outside of Corvega was incredibly intense as there were tons of enemies in front of and behind me, but the Metro handmade pistol I was using was very accurate and very powerful, so I was able to actually land shots outside of VATS, unlike with the Stallion, but I was also able to hit quite hard when I was able to get a shot in, which prevented me from getting overwhelmed. Fighting the raiders in the Corvega lobby was like a bullet hell. Tons of them pouring in, very little cover, and any that I killed that I didn't headshot or double tap came back as zombies, effectively doubling the already tons of enemies. I did die once, but it was after killing a metric ton of raiders. So for my next attempt, I camped in the bathroom right next to the main entrance, and while it didn't go great at first, the second time ultimately gave me enough time to actually push into Corvega and take out the raiders as they were coming to me. It was actually really intense and action-packed. This is the kind of tight gameplay I enjoy from more difficult challenges. I eventually worked my way up to Jared and his newly added buddy, Flesh Eater Nathaniel, but after a lot of back and forth and healing, and also a couple Nuka-Cola Quantums, I took down both of them and all of their machine guns and cronies, and it only cost me a broken right arm and brain damage. 10 Pints was happy, Preston was happy. I multiplied my speed by 5 times because I was having another heart attack, which makes you move slow as molasses, which would have made this video take forever because I have to walk everywhere. I gave myself a surgery to heal my arm and head, as well as a blood pack and some painkillers for the blood loss and pain caused by the surgery. And I was on to Greentop Nursery, where the residents wanted me to clear out some ghouls from a nearby National Guard base. There were some gunners that made it difficult to get into the training yard, and some mines that killed me a couple times. But once I made it into the facility, I just brained all the ghouls inside with my AK. The biggest problem really being my lethal dehydration at the time. I ended up running out of ammo for my AK while finishing off the zombies and some straggling gunners that made it inside, so I used my VSV to take out the final glowing one. And then I had another heart attack. I'm starting to feel like Kira Yoshikage. Next I was off to Grey Garden, a settlement of robots that needed my help boosting their water pressure for their garden. Before that though, Sturgis agreed to help me with the molecular relay, so I built that, entered the Institute, talked to Sean, talked to the real Sean, and began the third and final act of the run. After coming back, I barely survived another heart attack, and then I was off to reclaim good old Gabe at Libertalia. I'll give you the highlight reel here since this took about an hour and a half, but this was essentially a lot of me peeking out from behind cover and trying to do like 2 damage with my scrap handgun without getting my head blown off, me trying not to freeze to death with hand warmers, me picking off raiders who were distracted by zombies and a random Mirelurk queen who just happened to show up here, a lot of VATS, a lot of hiding, and a lot of running. From exhaustion and dehydration, I basically only had half my AP bar, and despite my heavy armor, I was dying every 5 seconds. This was probably the second hardest and second most frustrating portion of the run. I say second because the hardest section was the glowing sea, and the most frustrating, well, that's yet to come. Eventually, using a combination of a lot of explosives timed just right for maximum effect, and a real deal gunfight with a legendary raider that felt like something out of Call of Duty, or maybe more aptly Gears of War considering all the time both of us spent hugging cover, I got through all the raiders, saved at the top of Libertalia, fought off some more raiders that hunted me down, and went up to Gabriel and said those honeyed words that every runaway synth wants to hear. Or at least I tried to, but a zombie bugged out the dialogue, so I just tried to kill them all with Molotovs, but that didn't go well. The next couple times in, they jumped and killed me since the scrap handgun didn't have enough power to kill either of them before they defeated my companions, but after turning Gabe off and switching to my newly upgraded Monster Stallion, it was much easier to take out his left and right hand men and complete the quest. I took care of my hydration problem, used a sleep aid to cure my insomnia, and slept in my Institute quarters to save and heal, and then Sean asked me to head to Bunker Hill to retain some escaped synths, but I took this opportunity to start setting up for the Minutemen's nuclear option instead by going to help more settlements, namely Grey Garden from earlier. Getting there was a hassle because of some nearby Children of Adam, but when I did get there safely, they just asked me to head to the Weston Water Treatment Plant and get the pumps working again. My only obstacles were the super mutants out front that I just ran past, and some Mirelurks inside, so suffice it to say that another, different, but equally as roided out stallion that I upgraded was strong enough to take out any and all Krabby Boys incredibly easily. After almost dying of rad sickness because most of my masks were busted at this point, Vanna White was satisfied with my fixing the pumps, and so was Preston. Enough to the point that it was now time to take back Fort Independence. To get there, I quite literally just started at Diamond City and ran past everything else as fast as possible and barely survived, taking to swimming for half of the journey just to avoid a group of super mutants, but after again restoring my hydration with seawater somehow, I talked with Preston and the rest of the Minutemen and decided to use the firing line tactic to kill the Mirelurks. I set up some mines in preparation for the Queen's arrival, and when she did, I immediately took cover due to having 2 broken legs at that point and shot her from inside the fort with a stallion, killing her easily after a couple of mag dumps and getting my mask busted by one of her little guys. After that, the castle was ours. So in waiting for Ronnie to call me for the armory quest, I used my duplet to kill all the mole rats at the Starlight Drive-In, fought off super mutants at Abernathy Farm, spoke to Blake, who wanted his daughter Mary's locket returned from USAF Satellite Station Olivia, and killed Ak-Ak and all her goons there to retrieve the locket for Blake, all done in preparation for the Minutemen's nuclear option. After hitting up Diamond City again for food, water, supplies, and a workbench for some more weapon modifications, I headed to County Crossing and agreed to help the settlers there with their Revere Beach Station raider problem. When I got there was a 3-way war going on between another random Mirelurk queen, super mutants, and the raiders that I was there to kill, and every time I got involved, I died horrifically, so I just decided to run past them all into the station to let nature take its course out there, and deal with the raiders I was actually sent here to kill. A couple followed me inside, but they didn't make it for long, being that they were basically funneling into a kill box. And after that I worked my way through the metro, haha yeah I said the thing, and I used their sleeping bags when I could between taking out raiders that had hunted me down and raiders I was there to hunt down. Eventually I made it to the end, and though the raider leader had a very powerful gun, we played Gears of War Versus and I came out the victor. Afterwards I did a couple settlement defenses, and finally enough time had passed for Ronnie to call me. It was all downhill from there, as we did the Old Guns mission, which was pretty much just a don't get killed by trap sim, save for Sarge, who killed me once with his self-destruct, but other than that wasn't all that difficult. Then finally I was off to make the Institute hate me at Fallout 4's equivalent to Blighttown, because I was getting a whole single frame rate here. The only people that were aggressed to me at this point were the Railroad, so I dispatched any of their agents in my way to get into Bunker Hill with my stallion, and apart from having the most sniper elite gunfight with these 2 Railroad heavies that I've probably ever had, it was pretty easy. Even killing the Courser took like 2 seconds because of the stallion. Father doesn't like me anymore because I tried to sun him, literally. And then it was immediately on to the penultimate Minutemen quest, defending the fort. This was the most frustrating part of the entire run. It was awful. At first it was going well. I was using my Tikhar, we had solid defenses, the Minutemen were holding the line, it was fine. But things quickly started to unravel. Coursers started spawning in, synths started teleporting into the fort, all the turrets were getting destroyed, we were losing most of our people, and even after switching to a busted stallion I upgraded out the wazoo, I was still eventually pushed out of my own fortress. It was a disaster. The whole ordeal took about an hour, and I'd venture to say that nearly, if not more than half of that time was spent by me being killed. Regardless, after successfully defending the fort, it was time to take out the Institute. I equipped another Metro handgun that I had modified to be a killing machine, the handmade pistol, and though I died to rad poisoning because of some raiders between me and the Institute back door, I was able to just swim past them after getting back, and I made it into the Public Works maintenance area, where I took out all the synths and zombies there with laser precision, teleported the Minutemen in, and, dressed as a true Spartan Ranger, I marched on the Institute. I used my Tikhar to blow through the initial line of defense, using up the last of my newly created ball-bearing ammo. I used up the last of my 545 with my other decked-out handmade pistol while getting into the Institute Bioscience Lab, and while in it, against synths, zombies, and the synth gorillas. I hopped myself up on every conceivable drug and performance enhancer you could think of, and I rushed into the main room with my duplet, constantly eating and drinking and using stim packs to give myself the most possible health regen I could muster on top of all of the damage resistance and damage buffs from the drugs so that I could tear the room apart a la Doomslayer. I had one last heart-to-heart with Sean while I was dying of dehydration from all the hard drugs I just took, and he was fleeing in terror from a zombie somewhere around here, and we parted ways as I set out to the reactor to wipe out the Institute. I found a water fountain which helped me with my dehydration, but with 2 injured arms and an injured head, I wasn't going to be able to fight off all the synths in the main area again, so I used my duplet to clear a path to advanced systems, used my stallion to clear it out, and made my way to the reactor. At this point, I had amassed tons of drugs, food, and grenades, so I loaded up on at least one of each of all of my different drugs and threw like over 25 grenades into the room where all the synths were trying to protect the reactor, ready to stuff every bit of food I had down the hatch and bust into the room with my stallion in a blaze of glory to take out whoever was left. But as it turns out, like, one guy was left after my grenades and Nick and Preston rushed in before me. With that done, I set the fusion pulse charge on the reactor, brought Sean 2.0 with me, and thanked the Institute for that castle defense mission. Honestly, I was expecting the survival elements to be the toughest part of the challenge, the needing food, water, and sleep, only being able to save from sleeping, the staying warm and keeping a gas mask on, and the actual meat of this survival plus challenge. But honestly, with all said and done, the hardest part of the challenge was definitely just fighting any enemies. They all dealt 2.5 times damage by virtue of just being on survival. They were smarter, stronger, more varied, and hunted me down from some mods I downloaded. And the survival plus stuff tanking my health, AP, or stats definitely didn't help. I really believe that this challenge basically would have been impossible for me had I not started the game with such high endurance and agility. But that's exactly why I distributed my stats that way, for more health and action points since I knew they would be the most often decreased and the most needed throughout the run. Despite the adversity I faced, I completed the challenge how I live my life. Hopped up on hard drugs and alcohol, severely dehydrated, with 2 broken arms and a concussion, and having a heart attack. If you guys want to try this challenge, it took about 30 hours for me, and I've never even played survival before. Not for a full playthrough like this anyway. So if you're a fan of Metro, or you're an expert on survival mode and are looking to give your next run an extra oomph, I'd recommend this challenge. So to answer the question, can you beat Fallout 4 on survival mode plus? The answer is yes, but certainly not easily. If you enjoyed the video and want more Fallout content in the future, be sure to let me know by liking and subscribing. It supports me and the channel, and it allows for me to make more content for you guys more often, and maybe even better quality in the future. Who knows? I've finally gone through all my ideas for Skyrim and Fallout 4 runs, so if you have any suggestions for any Elder Scrolls or Fallout challenges, be sure to leave them in the comments. Well, I've been Chris, also known as Red Fox, and I'll see you all next time. Peace!